Evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the 5th local lamb lesson. We have one more after this. I did want to make sure that you all knew the site visit for this lesson is not in 2 weeks. It's on May 3rd, and that'll be at Kinderhook Farm. I'll send you all an email verifying that before the next classroom session, just so there's no confusion. The next classroom session is breed selection. So I think if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. We can make sure you're registered for that as well. Tonight we have Kathleen Harris here to talk about meat production. I think I've met you all, but I'll tell you a little bit about HVADC just in case. We are the only economic development agency in the Hudson Valley that focuses on viability of the agricultural economy in the region. We help existing agribusinesses, new and existing farms, family farms transitioning from one generation to another, brand new farmers. If you have a question, please call us. We have a staff of 4. We just had someone join us. Her name is Carrie Jones Ross, and she's doing a program called Feed HV. It's a regional food rescue and gleaning network. If you have any question about gleaning, donating food, volunteering, or just want to know about the program in general, please let me know. I can send you her information and get you in contact with her. We do as well do programs that we've are known for. We do a farm and food accelerator, business accelerator, which is mentoring and training. That is best explained as curriculum-based. It's about a 6-month program and follows a more strict schedule. We do Incubator Without Walls if you're looking for business planning, legal help, advice specific to your farm or business. We would put you in touch with a consultant, have you fill out the application, put you in touch with them, and it's at your own pace. So anything, any question, don't think any question is too small, too silly, too strange. Call us. There's someone that we can either put you in touch with or help you ourselves. So if you have any questions for me, please let me know. I'm going to turn you over to Kathleen, and I hope you enjoy the evening.
I'm going to put the mic back here. Thank you. I don't really think I need that because we're a nice little intimate group here. So since we are such a small group, I think this can be interactive. If you have a burning question, just let me know when we're going through the slides, because I'm happy to address it as we go, because sometimes we can forget things that may seem more important in the moment. Maybe we could shut some lights off so this is a little better. Jennifer, could you dim the lights a little bit so this could be a little... That's better. Thank you. So I'm at a complete disadvantage here today because I didn't go to any of your other classes. So I may be repeating things that you've already heard. But when I was asked to speak on this subject, I just thought, well, if I were new to the business, how would I proceed in a logical sense? And the first thing I would do is assess my resources. Does anybody here already own land? Yay! Does anybody here already own buildings on the land? Yay! Okay. Fencing? Capital? Wow. Management skills? Maybe you should be up here teaching this.
I learned that sheep lay eggs.
Okay, we have a little bit to learn that. Labor. Are you all your own labor, or do you actually hire some labor? Probably some of both. I haven't learned that yet. My husband and I still do our own labor. Proximity to markets, transportation. Do any of you have a truck and trailer? Great. And access to shearers and feed. Is shearers? Not yet. Okay, I'm going to go around the room. How many of you are not yet in the sheep business? Hey, you had all the answers back there. How can you have all this stuff and not
I'm
be...
getting ready.
Okay, you're getting ready.
It takes a while.
Okay, and how many are just started? Just started. Okay. All right, you're in the process. Okay, so we still have a little bit more to learn. So after you assess your, everything that you've got going for you, then you have to determine what your goals are. Do you want to be part-time? Do you want to be full-time? Do you want to support a family? Do you want to support half your community? What do you want to do? What is your goal? So after you determine whether or not the sheep business is right for you, you're going to launch headfirst into educating yourself. And probably the best site I've seen on that is the sheep and goat marketing site that Cornell puts out, and I think they also work with University of Maryland on that as well. There are some very good extension fact sheets. One is included in your bundle there of papers that Jennifer has at your places. The other is Pipestone. I don't know how many of you are dealing with a vet already, but a lot of vets don't know a lot about sheep or goats. But, they're pretty much dairy or equine. So to throw the ovine in there is a little bit off-putting for some of them. In fact, we just had an issue where we actually needed to call upon a vet for an out-of-state shipment. And that vet is probably just fresh out of vet school, but we were very happy to have him express an interest. And that's pretty much the best you can get as far as what I've seen for the sheep business is, are they really interested in helping you because they appreciate the species? Because if they're not, like I had one vet who said, I've never done this before, we had a prolapse. I've never done this before on sheep, I've never used a harness, but I'll charge you half the rate if you let me learn with you. Okay, that's somebody who cares. That's really what you can hope for, is somebody who actually wants to help you with your sheep. Okay, now that was on my list to bring that, but the SID Sheep Industry Handbook, I got my education at Penn State in animal production, and that was the course we used, was the Sheep Industry Handbook, and it's also available through Pipestone and some other places. Pipestone is out of Minnesota. Has anybody heard about them as a, yeah. So they have this great catalog, and I'm going to pull, I did remember to bring that, in fact. The catalog, is all sorts of sheep supplies, but then you also have tidbits of knowledge. And if you buy enough, you get their newsletter, or I guess you could actually, whoops, you have all my orders here. But there's some great things in this, and it's just, if you go online, hit Pipestone, I'm sure they can send you a catalog. But Shepherd's Choice Management Tips, they'll say right here, they'll put it in a little block. Okay, these products are for sale for this reason, but this is our management tip. This is our tip. And those are some very important things. I found them to be very good as far as education. The other good thing about this, if you can't find a vet who's willing to help you or at all knowledgeable, they have an on-staff group of vets. Just have to have your question ready, call their 800 number, and they will help you as best you can expect over the phone. So that's a very good group. For others,
For free, right?
yes, for
Yeah.
free. But don't waste their time. That's why I always have it written down and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Is that publication that we're just talking about available as a PDF online?
It's a catalog, it's a sheep catalog, so it may be, I don't know.
Okay.
Then Mid-States Wool Growers is another sheep catalog we use, that's pretty much for sheep. And then Jeffers is a general livestock catalog, and there's a lot of sheep supplies in there. I guess you really don't need all my order forms. Okay, so those are some important things. It's very important if you're going to embark on a new enterprise to be well educated in it. And I'm not saying you have to have a bachelor's degree in it, but I am saying that there's a lot of good information out there that will help you thwart some problems. And once you get into some problems, you'll be able to be more knowledgeable about how to handle it. Also, an important thing to understand is the USDA livestock reports. Was the New Holland report reproduced and in your group packet?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so reminder before we're done, and we'll go over how to read that. I'm also a licensed livestock rater. Probably my license is defunct at this point because that was when it was a former life. But I used to work for AgriBusiness as a licensed livestock rater, and so I was trained by USDA to evaluate livestock in the flesh and then have it correlate to how it ends up in the carcass. So those are important things. Sheep and goat marketing calendar, which you can access through the Cornell website, which is very important if you're planning on marketing to the ethnic populations. You'll want to know when their holidays are. Yes, that should be reproduced too. And of course, your Cornell website is actually the same thing as sheep and goat marketing info. So the next thing you're going to want to do is develop a marketing plan and work backwards. Now these are just, there are other marketing ways to market your lambs, but these are just some things I thought we could talk about today. When I refer to a lamb as finished, I mean that it has some amount of fat cover on it and it's at a point where someone would want to buy it. Okay, so it's finished. So there are lambs based on the breed that you decide to work with. There are some lambs that will finish at about 80 to 90 pounds, and there are others that will still not be finished at 120 to 130 because they're, I don't know if you've gone to the show rings, the fairs, and you see how high these animals are and some of these show rings. Well, that's probably why I stopped being asked to be a judge, because I would put those animals at the bottom of the pack because I just thought they were impractical when you decide to market lambs. You know, they're too big, they're too heavy, and unless you're doing the hotel restaurant trade, normally people don't want that size chop. So anyway, 90 to 120 is about where you want to be for finished lambs if you're going to do some sort of retail. Selling hothouse lambs. Does everybody know what a hothouse lamb is? Okay, hothouse lambs are lambs that are typically wean lambs. In other words, they haven't been weaned yet, they're still on their mothers. So they should, they're typically sold for Christmas, Easter, and other holidays like that. That's not the Muslim market, that's another whole realm in itself, but the hothouse lamb market is more for Christmas and Easter, okay? And those lambs are typically 40 to 60 pounds live weight. Now, there are farmers who wean those lambs, but it definitely affects the quality when they're dressed for market. Then there's the ethnic trade, where most common and popular today is direct marketing from your home, or you can pay attention to livestock auctions and market and pay attention to the ethnic calendar and send your lambs to auctions at that time. But the ethnic trade, we have delved into that somewhat, and I'll have some pictures of how we do that later. But that's pretty much one holiday a year. It's called Eid al-Adha, and it's Festival of Sacrifice, and it's normally in the fall, but it backs up 2 weeks each year. So this year, I think it's the end of August. And those folks want to come to your farm and do on-farm ritual slaughter. So you have to be prepared for that and know what you're getting into on that. We'll talk about that later. Oh, no, I guess we won't. We'll get right into that. So here is the ethnic slaughter, or the Muslim slaughter on the left. The way we do it is we have some hooks and we put them around our hay wagon, and so that people can be working all around the wagon with their hanging lambs. You can see where the hanging lambs are. Right there's a hanging lamb, there's another one. And here's the thing. A lot of these folks are from very varied countries, and some of them are warring with each other. So you try not to let them interact too much. because you really don't want any of this. This is a very peaceful day on the farm. It's very important for them to bring their families. I ran into some problems with children. I love children, but I don't like it when they're rocking my lambs. I mean, throwing rocks at my lambs. So I had to stop children from attending, but it is typically a family day. Eid al-Adha, Festival of Sacrifice, is actually based on the biblical story of Abraham, how he was willing to sacrifice his son for God, and God said, no, stop. And so this is all based on that. So this holiday for them is based on that. And it's important for them to have a peaceful environment. Typically, I will have all the lambs in a pen marked for them because when they come, they already have their lamb picked out. I ask that they come ahead of time and they pick their lamb, and then that lamb is marked for them, and I give them a receipt. And based on what they paid, I normally request a $50 deposit. And I weigh the lambs for just a general knowledge, but I can't sell based on the weight, so what I'll do is I'll break it down, anything above 80 pounds is $200. From 70 to 80 pounds might be 175. That sort of thing. Just give them a roundabout number there. But, I do have a scale to weigh to get ideas, and if anybody questions the weight, we can put it on in front of them. But I don't have it certified by the county every year, so that's what I'm telling you. So what you cannot provide for these folks is, you can't do it for them. Okay, now I had somebody come a few months ago and say, they showed up at my door and they said, I don't know what ethnicity they were because it wasn't a holiday that I was familiar with. They just showed up and said, can I have a lamb? And I said, well, sure, let me show you the lambs. And they said, okay, where will you kill it? And I said, I won't kill it. I said, it's illegal for me to kill it and give it to you. You have to kill it yourself. I can't even give you a knife. I can give you water and I can give you a bucket, but I can't even give you a knife and have it be legal. So they have to understand that. Now they can hire someone else, they can bring someone else with them, but basically this is for their own consumption. So halal slaughter is different if you've never witnessed it. It's a lot like kosher. And if I'm offending anybody, too bad, because you know what, this is about meat production, and this is about slaughtering animals. So I hope you're not expecting me to say harvest and all that other fancy stuff, because I'm not there. So I talked to Temple Grandin. I happened to be at a presentation that she was giving in Syracuse with a friend of mine, and I asked her point blank, I said, how can I make sure that my lambs are being humanely slaughtered? They're halal slaughtered. And she said, well, the best way would be to stun them first with a bullet. And I said, halal doesn't allow that. And she said, I know. So the important thing is that they use a knife that's very, very sharp, and they make one cut. And so she said, in fact, you should be able to take that knife and cut a piece of paper in front of you. It should be very sharp. And I said, I've actually seen them do that. So a lot of times they'll have one of their imams come in the official dress, and they'll open up a full suitcase full of different knives and stuff to use, and they do this. So it's a pretty good group by and large, and I haven't had any problems with the adults. Like I said, just the children that weren't being properly watched. But in fact, I did have a person who called me up afterwards and said, I think I cheated you. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, no, I think I still owe you $40. And I said, I counted all the money beforehand, I counted all the money afterwards, and every cent is accounted for. You don't owe me any money. But he argued with me. He goes, I cannot live with myself. This is a heavy burden on me and all this stuff for $40. So anyway, so I'm just saying, this is a religious holiday for you, for them, and I get kind of a kick out of it, because I'm a person of faith as well. So I get kind of a kick out of the fact that they have this for themselves.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The previous holiday that you were talking about, your farm, how do you grieve when the holiday keeps moving 2 weeks? How does that work?
Well, that's just it. This year, that year, it had to be, everything was born in March that year, okay? And if it wasn't born in March, it was going to be too young, okay? Because the requirement is that it be 6 months of age. Now, I've had several of these folks say to me, oh, well, I asked my imam, and he said that they just don't want to be babies. They don't want to be nursing. And I say, okay, well, these have been weaned since they're 2 months old, because that's our program. We wean at 2 months. And I said, they're not small. Their mothers are nowhere around. So if because I've had one fella came and he bought 7, and he was actually an imam. And I found out after I had checked the book, and I called him and I said, I'm sorry, all of the lambs were born in April this year. And I didn't realize it when I took your deposit. And so I said, I'm more than happy to give it back to you. But fortunately, because I had taken everybody's name for deposit and for receipt, I had everybody's phone numbers, and I called them all back. He's the only one that wouldn't take the lambs. The others all checked, and talked about this and that, and it went back and forth about how rigid they are with that requirement of 6 months. So,
But eventually you're going to have to move your lambing, right? I mean,
well, not me. I just won't
Oh,
market
okay,
to
so
them.
you
I
don't
just
adjust
won't
to
market
that
to
at
them.
all?
No,
Okay.
no. There's plenty other fish in the sea.
Yeah.
So, no, I won't move my marketing back past March.
No.
Yes.
Now, as far as disposal of the blood and the offal,
Yes, what we do is and it's a whole day, or at least a few hours of setup prior to their coming. So, you can't see it, but here was a tractor with the bucket on it, and then I had barrels, and you can't really see them. I had barrels posted for garbage and barrels posted for offal, which is the guts. So they could slaughter into the barrels, but then those barrels had to be dumped before they dumped into the bucket of the tractor. So it was easy for my husband to bury them because, they don't take it with them. Any other questions on this? Yes.
do you have problems with prejudice after?
No, we don't bury the guts anywhere near our sheep operation. We have 120 acres, so we take it remotely. And predators are something that I don't talk about here, but I will address it right now. We don't have predator issues, and that's because we make a point of bringing our sheep in every night. Okay? And you don't have to lock them in a barn in the middle of August when it's too hot for them, and they may be pregnant, and they may, have embryonic absorption because it's too hot. We have a corral outside, right up against the barn. So, but we lock them in every night. Okay? And there are a lot of other people who use other things to deter predators, and one of them is guard dogs. One brother uses, I have 2 brothers in the sheep business. One uses guard donkeys. He has 3 of them, and they've been very effective. One uses a guard llama and a guard alpaca, and they're pretty good, but before that he used guard dogs. So, so they've used a lot of them, and he'll pasture very remotely. So I like to know my girls and boys are in the barn, and I just feel more comfortable with that. And it's not that we don't hear the coyotes, we hear the coyotes. We're just glad they're quiet about and not bothering our lambs. So here I am, whoops, wrong way. Okay. Did I go all the way the wrong direction? Okay. So here I am this is me marketing, this is direct marketing. This is direct marketing, but you're only marketing the, the carcasses. Actually, you're marketing the live plants. So this is direct marketing at a farmer's market. The one I did then for 12 years was in Margaretville. And so we also had pork. So we had over 30 different items in this little box here, which has ice in the bottom of it. You see there's a little spout there, and there's a hose behind the skirt of the table to drain the water from the melting ice throughout the day. So we would market directly. A lot of people go to farmers markets and they leave their stuff in coolers. I don't like to do that because I think people want to see what they're buying. So we later, like when my husband, we built a box like this for my husband because I would go to Margaretville and market all day, and he would go to New York City and Tribeca. And with him, it was a little bit warmer, so we covered this with a plexiglass top. So his wasn't as fast a moving market as mine, so it doesn't look very busy there, does it? But anyway, so this was our farm name. We've since moved, so that's not the farm name. These are blankets that we made out of the wool from our sheep, and typically right here is where we would pile all our dozens of eggs for my son that had a little chicken hen house. And so we'd sell the eggs, we'd sell the pork and the lamb in there, and then I had a friend who had Arrowhead Farm, and she did pastured poultry, and so we would sell for her at the market. Okay? So that's just direct marketing. So one of the things you're wanting, and I guess you're going to learn about that next week, or next time, is to select a breed that matches your marketing goals. So some of the things you want to think about is, how are you marketing? Are you planning on marketing by cutting into cuts? You don't want something that's only going to, bring you a carcass and, people call them the lollipop chops. You want a decent sized ribeye under chop, at least 2 square inches. So I kind of think that of lambs with a little bit bigger frame size, Dorsets and Polypays are what we have. I think those make good carcass size lamb chops and good carcass size, so you have more yield from those carcasses. Although I will tell you that we feed grain to our lambs when we finish our lambs. So it's easier for us to bring our lambs up to a bigger carcass size. Typically people who are 100% grass-fed don't want a lamb that's going to finish at 100 pounds. They want a lamb that's going to finish on grass, and that's normally around 80 pounds. So they're going to have a little smaller chops, but they got to do it all on grass, and that's very challenging, but it's a good thing to do. All right, so your frame size and your conformation, your out-of-season breeding, that was also very important for us. I grew up on a sheep farm, and we had lambs when other people didn't. So I saw the advantage from the marketplace when you have lambs when other people don't. Typically if you're selling hothouse lambs at Christmas time, they're higher than at Easter time, and that sort of thing. So also when you lamb in the fall, which we had a very big lambing in the fall, and we're just having a small lambing in the spring. The big lambing in the fall, now we're raising those lambs up, and we're marketing them now as larger lambs, anywhere from 80 to 110 pounds. And so we don't have to put that much more into them to get quite a few more dollars out of them. So, but we did hothouse for a very long time, but it just became it didn't keep pace with what the other markets did.
So, sorry, I'm assuming you're in this area on the other side of the river, right?
We're in Montgomery County, which is the Mohawk Valley.
So if you have fall lambs, then would you have any pasture for them to go on at all, or would you just like?
Okay, so that's a thing that we have made a decision over the years. We're not fond of pasturing our lambs. So we pasture our ewes, and if we have like the small lambing that we've had this spring, we may kick them out with their ewes. But because we wean at 2 months, you run into more problems with that. Okay, so if you're pasturing, they're more highly susceptible to parasites. If you never wean, the people like my brother who is a grass-fed farmer, he never weans his lambs, most of them, until they're gone on the truck to slaughter. So they don't, the most stressful thing you can do to a lamb is wean it, okay? And it's at that time when you'll have, they carry a certain parasite load, but when they're weaned, that parasite load can become deadly to them. It's also the same thing with coccidiosis. When you wean them, that can become very deleterious to their health. So if you keep them on their mothers while they're, and you're only lambing once a year, and you keep them on their mothers all through the grazing season, that's great. You probably won't have any problems with parasites to any large extent. You still want to probably, check their eyelids and see if they're, suffering under a parasite load. But in general, the way we do it, and I'll talk about it when I talk about our Harris model, is that we lamb heavy in the fall. They come in great condition off pasture. The ewes have had a lot of exercise, great condition. And then once they lamb, they're in the barn until we put them out this spring. Okay. Prolificacy is the number of lambs the ewes have. Okay, so because we've had a group of polypays, we bought 60 polypays at one time, our lambing percentage went up from 150 to 170% in the fall, okay, which is pretty unusual for the fall because you're talking about breeding them in a lower estrus period. So they don't normally, my father could never get more than 130 lambing percentage with fall-born lambs. You do suffer in that regard with fall-born lambs, but the money you get on the other end is kind of compensates for that. So prolificacy, because we had this infusion of polypays, we had a lot more triplets. How many people like triplets? I don't like triplets. They're a lot more work. If you have it figured out where you can take the lambs off and leave her with two and everything works out, or you can bucket feed them or whatever you want to do, there are many ways to address multiple births, but it's just not as easy as a ewe that has two good lambs and knows how to raise them. There's a lot of extra fooling around with that. Wooled versus hair sheep. So that could be something if you have assessed that you can't find a shearer, or you're not planning on shearing them yourself. You might say to yourself, well, I'm going to go for hair breed, and that's that. So then you talk about the different, does anybody know what those lambs are? Jacobs. Yes, that's right. The lady who helps me with the PowerPoint, she has those Jacobs, and I actually trucked them to the slaughterhouse for her that day. They're all in the slaughterhouse right now, but I trucked them to the slaughterhouse for her that day. And so I took that picture, and she said, oh, you have to use that. So there are different methods of marketing. We talked about the farmers markets, the ethnic holidays, the livestock auctions. There's a lot of good livestock auctions out there, on-farm sales that maybe are not, they could be for anything. They could be for Christmas and Easter. They could be some hothouse lambs. They could be some Muslim lambs. They could be anything as long as the people are coming and taking the lambs or slaughtering them on the farm. So that's on-farm sales. Also wholesale accounts. There could be any number of things. You might want to sell to a restaurant. You might want to sell to a distributor. There are a number of ways you can go about finding a wholesale market. So getting started, the shepherd's calendar. The gestation for sheep is 147 days. So when we have our replacement lambs that we plan to enter into our ewe flock, we normally breed them at about a year so that they lamb at a year and a half. And so our replacements are handled a little bit differently than the rest of our ewes that we're preparing for lambing or preparing for breeding. But prior to breeding, like right now, we're shearing because we're going to be breeding in the middle of May. So we're shearing now, as cold as it is. We have a barn, so they're managing. And you trim the hooves then, and typically, like for instance, the group that lambed in the spring last month, I will typically worm everybody when they lamb. That's one time I lamb and I don't worry about Famach or anything else. I just lamb them I just worm them when they lamb, because that's when I'm doing everything with the lamb and the mother. And the reason again why you do that is because if they're a ewe can carry a certain level of parasite load, but when she is stressed with parturition and lactation, that is when she'll spike. Those parasites will become more deadly to her. So that's a stressful time for her, so I worm everybody at lambing time. So I don't typically worm at breeding unless they're showing signs that they need worming, which is I checked their condition and I also checked their eyelids using a Famach program, which is another program you should familiarize yourself with that Cornell teaches. All right, so at breeding time, after you've done all that stuff to get your ewes ready and your rams, you're going to make sure the rams hooves are trimmed and they're all up to snuff in their condition and everything. And you might want to, if they're showing a little thinness, you might want to boost up their feed a little bit more. But then you're going to release the rams at breeding time. Handling rams is something you need to be aware of also. When we introduced, we just bought 2 new rams from the Cornell farm up in Canton. And we had 5 rams, we got rid of 2. And so we were replacing those 2. So in order to introduce those 2 new rams to the other 3, which were already separated from the ewes, in order not to have lambs capriciously all year round, in order to do that, when you reintroduce rams, you're going to want to establish a pecking order. You're going to want to do this in a small, confined area. Okay, don't give them any length of backup, where they can back up and then they can butt, because they will kill each other. So you do it in a small area, and if you can't make the area as small as you'd like it to be, then you can, and we do this as well the first couple days, we put tires, big tires in there. So they have to trip over, they can't really get a good snack on each other. So that's an important thing in handling rams. The other thing is when you are handling rams, and pretty much most animals, but don't pet them here. This creates the bucking response. So don't pet them there. Pet them here. If you want to pet them here. And the reason why you would pet them there is it creates a submissive response to them, because that's how they nursed. They nurse their mothers that way, with their head up like that. So if you do this, you're not going to get them, turn them nasty, okay? If you do this, you might turn them nasty. You just have to be careful with rams. So those are just some little tidbits on the rams. The other thing is, I had a group of ram lambs that I was feeding the rams one day. And although they were very used to each other, I'd gone in the pen to feed them their hay. And for some reason, one of them went after me. And the other ram, he went after me, he bucked me, and the other ram, when he was backing up to hit me harder, the other ram went right in between us. Isn't that great? So I told him, and he was always been my favorite anyway, but he went right in there and blocked that ram from doing that, and so I told him he gets to die on the farm. Now, 2 weeks after that, that means he's never going to be culled, okay? So 2 weeks after that, the same thing happens again. Maybe it's me. The same thing happens again. I was in a pen of lambs, and these rams were young, so we were feeding them, and we were not split sex feeding, keeping the ewes and the rams separate. So we hadn't castrated this one particular group, and I had a ram go after me. And And my husband got in that pen so fast and pulled that ram and threw him against the wall. And so by the time I got myself out of the feeder, which he had knocked me into, I said to my husband, thank you, you get to die on the farm too. So anyway, so you just got to be careful with rams, no matter how long I've been working with them. And that, you know, I was born and brought up on a sheep farm, and I knew from the time I was 14 I was going to be a sheep farmer, like my parents. So it's been lifelong for me, and so I still, you know, get bugged every once in a while by a ram. Okay, but once you know, get them released to the ewes, normally they're very busy, especially if you let the ewes out a couple weeks ahead to flush them. I don't know if I mentioned flushing. Okay, no. So you're going to want to flush those ewes, which is typically increasing their rate of nutrition prior to breeding. Okay? So if they've been in the barn on hay and you're going to let them out, and now they're on lush pasture, you're changing their nutrition and you're increasing their level of nutrition. And so then that's called flushing, and you'll get normally a response in the number of lambs that they have, or your lambing percentage as a result of that. Okay, so you're going to want to flush 2 weeks, I'm sorry to put it in there, prior to breeding, prior to releasing the rams. And by then, you'll have, hopefully, the rams will be busy with everybody because they've been flushed for 2 weeks, and so pretty much everybody hopefully will be coming into heat. Then when gestation comes, you are going to want to leave them alone. Also, for breeding time, you're not going to want to have them on red clover. Okay, don't put them in a pasture on red clover at breeding time, because the red clover does something with their estrogen levels and you won't have as many lambs. Okay? So when they're gestating, you just have to make sure everybody's safe. You keep the water and minerals to them. You rotate your pastures, whoever managing your pastures, and just let them alone. We bring them in every night, but you know, pretty much I can just call them and look them in. So 6 weeks prior to lambing, now they've had this nice little 5-month respite. You know, you haven't bothered them, they're fine. They're gestating quietly, hopefully with 2 lambs in their bellies. And so 6 weeks prior to lambing, you're going to want to start to convert that rumen over a little bit. Okay, they are ruminants, and they've been used to this, all this great grass that you've been feeding them. But when you get them in a lambing jug, we'll show pictures of that later. When you get them into a lambing jug because they've lambed and you're now letting them bond in their own separate place, you're going to want to supplement them a little bit with grain. Even the grass farmers, 100% grass farmers, finish the lambs on grass, but they do supplement the ewes typically with a little grain at lactation to help them deal with the added nutritional needs of lactation. So prior to lambing, you're going to want to start getting the bacteria in their rumen ready for that grain by giving them just a little bit of grain. It makes it nice if you're bringing them in at night because they come in, you holler to them, you throw a little grain down, and they come running. So I'm talking, you know, not even a quarter of a pound a piece. Okay, less than that, even less, and then just work it up and don't get more than a quarter of a pound a piece. Okay, and we use shell corn, so we don't buy any fancy grains or anything, we just use shell corn. Okay, and the other thing that we do is vaccinate. I'm pretty sure I spelled that right, with a Satachi vaccine for the first-time lambers. We've had some difficulty with embryonic abortions on first-time lambers. We've had some difficulty with what is called ring womb. In other words, the lamb is starting to come, but the ewe hasn't dilated, so we've got problems that way. So we've just vaccinated all our first-time lambers now for that. And I think it's 6 weeks apart, in fact, I have to order it. It's 6 weeks apart, the vaccination and the booster. So we do that with our first-time lambers who have never lambed before. All right, so at lambing time then, we have jugs, we have mixing pens, we have grafting boxes, and we'll talk about processing the lambs in a bit.
Can I ask a question about the red clover before I went here? Right now, we aren't planning to breed the lamb, so pasture with red clover in it would not be harmful to just for grazing, right?
Oh, right, it's grape feed. Yeah, it's just a breeding time. And once they're bred, then it's no problem.
Okay.
And once they've lambed, it's no problem. It's just during breeding time. Okay, because you don't know when they're going to get bred. Yes.
Can you explain just the small, you were talking about creating small space for the rams. Can you just explain how you're introducing rams to the ewes?
Well, when we introduce the rams to the ewes, we want to make sure those ewes are in a state of receptivity.
Right.
So that's why we flush the ewes ahead of time, let them get their flushing done and all that, at least a couple of weeks before we let the rams out. And then we let the rams out, there won't be any problems.
So
They'll
are
be
you
busy
putting,
breeding.
how are you, I guess my question is, how are you dealing with the 2 or 3 rams? Are they going in separately?
No, we put them all out at once.
So when are they in their small space, just?
They're in their small space when they're separate. They get ornery when they can't be breeding. So they get ornery, so they're in the small space, and that's when we introduce them to each other.
Okay.
Okay?
What is flushing?
Flushing is increasing the level of nutrition of the ewes prior to breeding to have them pop more eggs, so you'll get more lambs, a higher lambing percentage. Okay, and you can do that a couple ways. You can do that with a fresh pasture that's really grand, or you can do that by giving them a little bit of corn or grain. There's a number of ways, but if they're on this, they're eating this every day, if you want to flush them, all of a sudden they got to go up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay?
And the up is an energy nutrient?
It can be,
What
yeah.
kind of-
Basically, you're raising their nutrition. It doesn't necessarily have to be energy. You know, if you've got good pasture, if they're just on mediocre pasture, and then, you know, you want to you put them in a really great pasture, it could be that.
Would you want to put them on new growth pasture?
You could, yeah.
You don't have the same concerns that you do with the horse about blood sugar spikes and laminitis and all those things. You don't have to worry about that with sheep.
Laminitis, I don't think I've ever heard of that for sheep.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so there's a couple different things here. This, I did the wrong thing again. All right, these are squares. Those are what you call our jugs. And then this is defining a mixing pen. And this is their hay rack. Over here is their waterer. It's just a stock tank, okay? But this was a new setup we used this year because most of our sheep are behind those doors. But this year we were pressed for space because we were feeding a larger group out because just about everything lambed in the fall. So we set this up as an extra mixing pen. So when they use lamb, we find out, we get the lamb and the ewe paired, and we put them in a jug. And it's just a 4x5 or 4x4 or something like that. And we just have the panels knocked together, and, you know, so you can do it with cattle panels, you can cut them and use them, or you can do it with wood like we did. This is wood. So there's 3 jugs over there. So for new mommies and babies, they go in there. When we put the ewe and the babies in there, the first thing we do is we strip out the ewe and make sure, because sometimes they'll have a wax plug at the end. Again, I don't know how much of this you've already heard in your other classes, but this is what we do. So we strip out the ewes, make sure they have their udder sound and their wax plug is out. Okay? And that also gives us a good idea if the lamb is nursed or if she hasn't nursed, or they haven't nursed. So then I need to know how much attention I have to pay there.
What is a wax plug?
Sometimes it's a little wax plug that gets in the end of the teat. So it may take a little working to get that out.
Yeah.
And it's easier for you to manipulate that out with your hand than it is for the lamb. So you just take a strip on each teeth, okay, basically, to get it started. And then make sure the lamb is warm. Now, if the lamb is not warm, they go into the house and they go in front of the wood stove, okay? Now, the important thing that you need to note here is that this is a wool blanket they're on. Now, the important thing that you need to note is that lambs, it's no sense to put the lambs on to nurse prior to bringing their body temperature up. If it's cold and they are hypothermic, okay, they will be not able to assimilate that colostrum that they're getting. So even if they get a belly full of it, it's not going to do them any good. Their body temperature has to be up. So here's a very important lesson. If the ewe has twins and she's identified one and licked that one and it seems thriving and it's gotten up to nurse, but the other one's not quite as fast in adapting to everything, the other one might be hypothermic and the one lamb is not, doesn't matter. Take them both away from her. Okay, bring them both in. One of those lambs was fine, but the other one probably was not, so I brought them both in. You can't leave one to the ewe by itself, because by the time the 2 hours are over, to get that body temperature up on those lambs, and I use a hair dryer, sometimes I use a rice bag underneath the wool. They just do what your motherly things you would do to warm an animal up, okay? And then once they start to move around, they blat, they do this little cute little lamb blat, and then I will have stripped out the ewe with her own colostrum into a bottle, and I'll make sure it's right temperature, which is baby bottle, put it on your wrist, baby bottle, and then I'll offer it up. And normally the lambs, once they're warm, will suck without too much coaxing. So, but if you had left one out on her and you warmed the other one up, by the time you brought that lamb back out to her, it's done. That lamb is rejected and she's decided she only has a single. So it's very important. If she has triplets, don't bring them all in and warm them up. Doesn't matter how many she has. Okay, so now this is a hay rack that we use. These are home-built things. There's another hay rack that we use, which is better because lambs can actually get in there. They sometimes think it's their house. These are wooden feeders that we've made. These are lambs on feed. And basically there's, down at the bottom is where the grain goes, and you can put hay in the top here, that's a slanted piece, but we prefer to use a round bale or even square bales in a central feeder like that. See, there's the lambs in there, thinking that it's their bed, and it's not their bed. See? Okay, so that's the same space that we just looked at here. That is now that with mamas and babies and the jugs taken down and they're starting to grow now. And that's what we call the mixing pen. Once you take them out of the jugs, they're now in a mixing pen. But you wait till the ewe and the lambs are stable. So when I say stable, when a lamb gets up, it gets up like this, and it stretches. If you see a lamb stretch, it's happy, it's healthy, okay? If you see a lamb staying humped up and stuff, it's cold, you check its mouth, typically it's cold, you gotta do something. You gotta go through the heroics. But these are all stable. So once they're stable, I process them. And once I process them, we leave them in the jug again at least another 12 hours, and then they go in here. When I refer to processing, you're going to want to know what that is. The processing is whatever you're doing to the ewe and the lamb, you're going to do it while they're in the jug. So you don't have to chase them all over the pen. So I have a tote, and in that tote I have all the equipment that I need to process the lambs. So Typically, at lambing time, I will, if I'm docking and castrating, I'll do that, but the lambs have to be very stable to do that. I'll always put a tag in the lamb's ears, and I will give my lambs 2 shots. I give them a shot of selenium because we have selenium deficient soils, so every lamb gets a shot of selenium, and every lamb gets a shot of CD and T. Tetanus is the T part, and C is CD is Clostridium perfringens. It's basically overeating disease. Okay, so every lamb gets that and the selenium, and if I'm docking or castrating, depends upon the market. You know, we had one market that required castration, so that was fine. Or if you're going to feed them to a finished weight, you probably should castrate so you don't have to split sex feed. Okay, if you're going to feed them to a finished weight of 90 to 120, because about 4 months they're starting to get sexually active. And the other thing we do is tag the lamb, 2 shots, dock and castrate. Oh, and the mother, that's when I worm the mother. I check her teeth, make sure she's got a good mouth. If she's lost a lot of teeth, because a lot of our ewes are very old. I mean, we've had a good life, so they're quite old. And a lot of time, in fact, I had 10 that I culled from my last lambing, and 6 of them raised their lambs, and I was culling them for teeth, because either they had no teeth or some teeth or whatever, but they were having difficulty maintaining their condition, and by the end of the lactation, they were thin. So they're being culled for teeth. Then what we do is we used to use the paint branders, you know, with the little, you know, branding things. Ugh, such a mess with the paint. So then we went to the spray markers, but you just have to make sure it's a spray marker that's scourable. Otherwise your wool is discriminated against. So then I check the ear tag. Oh, and I tag the ewe if she doesn't have a tag, but normally they have a tag. So I check the tag number on the ewe. I put that number on her back. Then I put that same number on the lambs. Now if she has a single, she just gets that number. But if she has twins, I put 2 little dots over the tail. I put it on the ewe and I put it on the lambs. Now the reason for all that numbering is especially if you're lambing a lot and you're putting them into a mixing pen, some might get lost. They might not stay connected with their mothers. So if you find a lamb in a corner that's all of a sudden hunched up or something, and you see 2 dots on it, then you can still read the number. You're going to put her back in a jug with her mother and her sibling. So it's just so that you can keep an eye on the lambs and make sure everybody's staying connected and the ewes are doing a good job. Now, this little baby has saved us a lot of lambs. It's called a grafting box. And it's got a framework, so it's a larger than jug. See the framework here? But it's a stanchion, basically. Now, this ewe had a lamb. The same day, another ewe had twins, and that ewe came in, I think it was a bad udder. I missed her on the previous cull, and she came in with only, no, excuse me. This just happened fairly recently. So this ewe she was her first time lambing, because she has a blue tag right there. That meant to me that was a first time lammer. So she had a nice lamb, nice single her first time, great, she's in good condition, she's got a great udder. This other ewe over here went into what we call in human terms postpartum depression. She didn't want to eat, she'd look at the lamb, but she didn't nuzzle it all the time, and she was losing weight. She just wasn't doing what she needed to be doing. I was afraid we were going to lose the ewe. So I said to my husband, I'm going to go get propylene glycol. We used to use it on the farm at home, and basically it's used for what they call ketosis, if it happens before the lamb is born, or also they call it twin lamb disease. when the ewe puts too much energy into the lamb production and she doesn't have enough left for herself. And the telltale sign of it is she was grinding her teeth. When I heard her grind her teeth, I said, I'm going to get some propylene glycol. We haven't used it. Well, my husband didn't even know about it, so I guess we never used it. And I gave it to her. I treated her, and you give it to her orally. But because she was suffering, you know, in other words, she wasn't really responding to the lambs and everything. She wasn't belting them out of the way or anything, but she wasn't really mothering them the way she should have. So I took one lamb away from her. I was afraid she was going to die. I took one lamb away from her because I said if she has to produce for two, she surely will die. So I grafted that lamb onto this mother because she was the first timer. She had plenty of milk. And I left the one lamb on her. And I remember I had to get up and go to, I have another job as a consultant at a slaughter plant, and I had to get up around 5. And I went out and I dosed her again, and she hadn't moved since the night before. She was still in the same position. Now, it had been also cold, so I cut off like a long John's top that was really frayed, and I put it over her so she had a warmer and stuff because she was shorn, and I didn't want to stress her any more than possible. And I went in that day and I said to my husband, graft that up, you might as well graft that other lamb on. I don't think it's going to work. I think we're going to lose her, blah, blah, blah. And by the time he went out, probably around 8, he said, I don't know what you did to that ewe, but she looked a lot better. So she had gotten up, and all of a sudden this medicine, or not medicine, but I don't know what it is, I guess it's a supplement, had kicked in. And she came out of it. So now she'll live to tell another tale, and she'll stay in the breeding ewe flock. So I'm really happy about that. That was a good success. You don't always have that good of success, but this grafting box is very good. Now, so other things that you should understand about it. The science behind it is that when a lamb is nursing a mother, she takes on the smell of the mother. Now, you know that when a ewe nuzzles a lamb to nurse, she licks underneath her tail, she smells there, and so that's how she knows it's her lamb. And within 3 days, the science is, within 3 days that lamb nursing that ewe, the lamb now smells like the ewe underneath her tail. So she's supposed to, within 3 days, accept that lamb. That's the science, folks. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it'll be 3 days, sometimes it'll be 3 weeks. One time we didn't have it at all, and we always had to go and make sure the lamb got its chance. The ewe was just so uncooperative, but you know, most times though, after a couple weeks, they'll be fine. This ewe was fine within a couple days. She was so good. It was great. So that's a great thing. And you know, other people, they take the lambs off, they bottle feed them and stuff like that. We're both working off the farm. We want to minimize bottle feeding. So this is the shepherd's calendar continued. So once your lambs and ewes are been in the mixing pen for a while, you want to get them ready to be weaned. After 2 months, we're going to wean them. So this is a creep area. And over here in the corner, there's a gate out of the mixing pen that has slots that only are big enough for the lambs to get through. And so these are lambs that are well started on creep feed. And we do buy actually a creep feed to feed the lambs, to start the lambs. It's actually a pelleted feed. I think we get it from Brown's. We have to buy it a ton at a time. But the reason why we get it from them is they'll do a special mix with us that includes Decox. And Decox is a coccidiostat that's allowable in a natural program. So, it's because we don't want to use Bobatec or Rumensin or things that are not allowed. Those are ionophores and they're not allowed, but Decox is in a natural program.
So, does that mean that you're not vaccinating? You don't do the CT vaccination?
Oh, no, we do that.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, the decox is a coccidiostat. That is different from overeating. They can get two things. So that they're in the creep feed and we don't want them to overeat. So we're very gradually building up the amount of feed that they get in their creep feed. And the decox will minimize coccidiosis, okay? But the overeating, don't forget the CD&T, I give it to them when I'm processing them when they're first born, but then you have to give them a booster shot a couple weeks later, okay? Don't forget the booster. I don't know, we just put in cleaning the barn and you can use lime for drying, but sanitation is really, really important. And we did struggle with it this year because of all the snow. We couldn't apply. My husband got half the barn, half the pens in the barn cleaned. He's in charge of manure removal. And he got half the barns and the pens in the barn cleaned, but then we had all those snowstorms in March and we just couldn't apply anymore. So the manure pack got a little higher than we like to see it, so we did, we had some issues with coccidiosis. So I talked about weaning and creep feed. There's another thing with weaning. Cornell recommended 3 days to take the either hay or water. First of all, the ewes can't be getting any more grain at this point if you're going to wean them. So for 3 days, you take either hay or water away from them. And don't give them a good hay either. Make sure it's a poor quality hay. We're just trying to keep them alive here and try to shut off the milk faucets. So for 3 days, they recommend taking away the water, maybe give them some hay, but let the lambs continue to nurse them. Okay, so the lambs are in the creep. They're going to the creep, and you're going to put a water bucket in the creep, but they're also going to continue to clean out those ewes. Okay, and then after 3 days, wean the lambs. Listen to a beller, because that's what's going to happen. And then once they're weaned and they're stable in the weaning, then you start to increase the feed a little bit more. But you want the feed in the creep to have increased to the point where they shouldn't miss a beat through weaning, okay? And then the marketing and transportation is the last part of it. All right, so here are some tools that we have. The scale right here is very important for measuring where you are as far as getting the lambs ready for market and how to price them. This is a regular hay rack, but these are the uprights I was telling you about. This is a Penn State design, and they did it for cattle, but I figured it works just as well for sheep too. So we put these slatted bars on, and it does, the notion is that they put their head in to eat, but they can't just back up and drop the feed right there. The notion is when they have to think about tilting their head to get out, they can't do two things at the same time apparently, which is chew their hay, and so they let the hay out in the hay rack instead of bringing it out with them. That's the notion. Works for Penn State anyway.
Does it work?
Hmm?
Does it work?
Does it work?
Yeah.
Yes, by and large it does. We prefer that hay
When
rack.
you're weighing the sheep, are they sheared or are they full color wool?
Well, like for instance, the lambs that we sold for Eid al-Adha a couple of years ago, those lambs were born in March. We didn't shear them through September, no. So they might have,
So that weight, say it comes at 95 pounds, some of that is the wool.
yeah.
That's okay with the person buying it? They know that? Problem, I want 90 pounds or 95 pounds of animal. I don't want to buy wool.
Right, if they want to come and shear it for, I mean, you got to pay $6-8 to shear. You're not going to do that, so you price it accordingly.
So, I don't know what Kate's going to do, but we're planning on just selling the sheep at the end of the season to a slaughterhouse or whatever. We don't want to keep the herd going. We want to buy fresh every year, graze and get rid of them in the late fall. So being that they have a full coat of wool on is not really a problem.
Okay, now, this particular, it's funny because we just shipped some lambs in February, okay? And I said to my husband, I'm going to do some market research. These were lambs, what I would call slow growers. They were twins, some triplets, whatever. They didn't make the lamb, sales in the fall. So they were short yearlings, basically. Okay, they were born in the spring, we shipped them in February, the following February. And they had quite a lot of wool on them. So I thought, wow, will we get penalized for that? Let's shear them this year. It's always easier when you can tell somebody else to shear them. If you had to shear them yourself, you wouldn't be shearing them, is what I'm saying. It's a lot of work. So, and I'm a shearer, so I know that. So I talked to my shearer and I said, oh, will you shear them? She said, yeah, it was only 9 lambs. We were going to do some market research. And there wasn't a real difference in the price. So I'm not convinced that it was worth the shearing.
Unless your goal is to do maybe meat and wool, but otherwise, don't be
Yeah.
concerned about it.
Yeah, right. And we had the wool, but, we're not bringing the wool up to Prince Edward Island anymore and making blankets out of it. We're wholesaling the wool. So it's not even covering the cost of the shearing. We don't make money on the wool. Okay? But there is a way to make money on the wool. Because when we were selling it direct to the individuals as blankets, I would always say to people, if we sold this wool wholesale, we'd be getting 50 cents a pound for it. But because we go through the heroics of bringing it up to Prince Edward Island, paying for the blankets to be made, and they mail them back to us, but paying for all that, with all expenses out, it changed from 50 cents a pound raw wool to $5 a pound, is what we were able to get back out of that wool, just from retailing and direct marketing and added value. Okay, so it's a moneymaker to do that. Other people want to leave the wool on, like those Jacobs lambs that you saw there. The reason why she has Jacobs is because she sends all the hides away to be processed, and then she sells the hides, which are very, beautiful, being black and white and unusual like that. So she can get a good price on the hides, so you wouldn't want to shear them either, because you want the hides on there. But as far as dressing percentage, people that come to your farm say, well, how much lamb am I going to get? And I typically tell them, if they're shorn, they'll get about 50%. If they're not shorn and they do have a wool coat on them, depending on how big it is, they may get 40 to 46%. Important thing is that you're honest with them. Okay, so these are some more pictures of our farm. We got the truck and trailer there, which is what I talked about as far as transporting. And this is a pretty little field that this was not here before, but we wanted to expand our pasture. So this was all hay field before, and then we had a bulldozer come in and he took care of getting across the creek there, and so now the ewes have a pathway across. We don't put water in any of our fields because they all come in to get water. They come to the barn. Nobody's that far away.
What do you recommend per acre for sheep? How many sheep per acre?
I don't remember that number off the top of my head. I'm sorry. It'll be in your literature. It'll be in your, but I really don't want to say a number. It depends upon your pasture. It depends upon, how often you expect to go on that pasture. Like, for instance, the grazing methods prescribed today are saying you shouldn't graze over land more than once in a season. That you should move it around, move the lambs around, and not have to hit the same pasture again in the same season. Well, we don't have enough land for that. So we have 75 ewes, and grazing lamb, just to tell you what we have. We have 75 ewes right now. We run anywhere from 200. Right now we're kind of gearing toward retirement. So we're down to 75 ewes, and I'd say we have, that pasture right there is about 10 acres. And we have another 3-acre pasture, that's 13. And we have another 3-acre pasture, that's 16. And probably a 4-acre pasture. We have about 20 acres of pasture. So that's how we're doing it, but we're rotating it, you know, and we're also doing, we had some ironweed in one of the pastures that we just couldn't seem to knock out, and so we're doing no-till seeding too to improve pastures. We don't plow anymore, got rid of that.
What happens if they eat ironweed?
Nothing, just they won't eat it, they don't like it, and so it becomes, you know,
It gets woody.
well, it just creates more of it, you know, if they eat all around it, and then, you know, you just get more of it. Okay, so let's talk about, I've been alluding to it through the whole thing, but this is how we do it. So we breed in May for October lambing, and then we breed in October for a March lambing. We don't have any border collies, and we don't have any guard animals, because we bring them in at night. I kind of would like to have some border collies, but we have a four-wheeler, that's good. And we pasture the ewes, and we barn feed the lambs. So that's our model. It's different than most, but that's the way we do it, sure.
You mentioned your brother uses donkeys, one of your brother uses guard donkeys.
Yes,
That seems like a nice idea, because you could have border collies and guard donkeys, because sometimes it's hard to have guard dogs and border collies together. Does your brother with the donkeys have border collies?
no. But my other brother with the llama and the alpaca has border
And they
collies.
get along nice.
I guess they get along. I don't know. I don't go near that llama and the alpaca. They spit at me.
What about the donkeys?
The donkeys, you know, he gives them apples and they come, but they're not really that social. You know, but he really does well with them, because he was losing quite a few coyotes, because he's got like 300 acres, and the whole back part of his fields are not fenced. So he was losing quite a few of the coyotes, and he said ever since he got the donkeys, and he had to bring the number up to 3 donkeys, he hasn't had any problems. So the donkeys have been great for him.
Are the donkeys aggressive at all with visitors?
They're aggressive to an intruder that's a predator to their animals.
What about like if someone comes with you, they don't know?
I don't know.
Yeah, they kind of,
They
in
can
in
be.
my experience, they also look at you
Yeah.
in a special way.
Okay, well, I will tell you, he goes to New Jersey to get these donkeys because they're supposedly, you know, raised for this purpose. They're not just donkeys.
Yeah.
Jersey donkeys.
They're Jersey donkeys. Yeah, they're not just donkeys, they're Jersey donkeys. No, they're raised for guards.
Yeah.
So they're raised in such a way, and they're trained to guard somehow. I don't know.
So turnkey donkeys, right?
Turnkey
Yeah.
donkey.
It's like,
Yeah.
already trained.
Somehow they're trained. So, he said that one time, he said this was the only time it happened, but one time, the donkey was braying. I mean, really braying. And they don't normally say much, right? So, it was at night, he went and grabbed his gun, and he ran out there. And there the donkey stood over a ewe who had been bitten. And the predator had gotten a hold of the donkey, had gotten a hold of a sheep, and had started to get at it. But it only got a couple bites in before that donkey was right there. And so that, I don't know what the donkey did to the predator wasn't around, but that donkey stood over that sheep and brayed and brayed and brayed until my brother came with the gun. Now, there was no predator left by that point. But isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That they just stood there and wouldn't leave and just brayed until my brother got there. So I think that's a good
We all need
good
that, we all need a donkey.
You what?
We all need a donkey.
I think everybody does. I learned to ride a horse on a donkey, actually. My oldest brother got my brother Tommy and I, we were just a year apart and we were only like 8 and 9, and he brought us a donkey, got us a donkey for Christmas one year, and he had a big red bow on it, and we were standing in the snow, and we got it for Christmas that year. So I have a fondness for donkeys too. They also rule the roost if they're in with horses. They always are the top dog. And I've been told from my friend who has a donkey and horses, that the reason they're top dogs is because they kick with both feet. So they have more wallop and their kick. Or a horse just kicks it on it. I'm not a horse farmer, I'm a sheep farmer. So anyway, that's our model, that's how we do it. We raise, my husband, you know, I think in every farm, like, you know, we're married, and so we have things that we each do, and pretty much my husband is in charge of field operations. So he's an agricultural engineer, and I'm an animal scientist. So I'm in charge of the health and well-being of the animals. He's in charge of the field operations and the equipment repair. So it works great. But we make a really good quality baleage and early cut hay and second cutting, even when it was really hard to make good hay last year, and we were able to get it done. And he just watches the weather really closely, and I got to give him a lot of credit. So those are some of our bales of baleage in that particular field. We line them up along the edge, and then we feed them out during the winter. And so that's our farm. That's a couple of our barns. This is basically all machinery put away for the winter. This end has it's a three-sided shed. And this end, he knew I always tend to overdo our space. And so he did about a quarter of that barn. He concreted and he put an automatic water in there because he knew where it's going to need it for ewes and lambs. So that space is our overflow, but it's mostly a machine shed. Then we have this grain bin with an auger, so we can just flip a switch and get the corn for the lambs. And then this is the rest of our barn. And that's our story.
You're cutting your own hay on the 20 acres, or are you going to be making baleage? How are you doing that?
Are we doing what?
Your hay, are you making your own large bales, or are you bringing them in and wrapping them? How are you getting your baleage?
Okay, so we do all our own field operations. So when the baleage is made, then we'll wrap it.
Right.
Okay, but the thing is, we also do this other operation. We have a complete wrap on it, which makes baleage because it's ensiled. But we also, and I'm the only one, I mean, we're the only one that we have seen in the area. Now, maybe somebody in this area does it, but we have a wrapper that leaves both ends open. We're not making baleage. We're just saving barn space. So basically, we're putting a clear wrap, you know, not a clear wrap, but a white or black wrap around the circumference of the bale, and then the ends are left open, and then the cure's in the field. But we're not putting it in the barn. A lot of people who sell round bale hay, and we do sell round bale hay, we have a very large Amish community by us, and they buy a lot of our extra surplus hay. And a lot of people who sell round bale hay store it in a barn so that it doesn't get much loss on it. But we have this plastic wrap that we do so it doesn't have the loss on it. So we have baleage, and we also make square bales. We make first cutting and second cutting and third cutting square bales. And
So it's getting stored under a cover.
oh yeah, yeah, it's just the round bales that are out. Let's see.
And you're not growing any of your own grain for that, you're bringing all that in?
No, we used to grow corn when we had more land. We had 360 something acres, and we've sold 2 farms. This is all in a process toward retirement. This is all planning. So, and we built this, this was one of our pieces, it was 120 acres, and it was remote from the rest of our farms. And it was on a dirt road, very secluded, and it's just really a sweet spot. And so we built a house and a new homestead there. And look at all the time we have. So you have all the questions in the world, or was this very clear?
What we're trying to, we're planning, you know, we're getting solar arrays put on the farm, and the engineers have tentatively agreed for us to raise sheep underneath the solar panels. And my thought, I don't know, Kate's gonna end up over that eventually. My thought is to buy weaned sheep that are stable to graze each spring, around May timeframe, raise them up until about November, and then sell them, and get rid of them that way. So you kind of answered a lot of those questions about where the sheep should be in the weaning process. They should be completely ready to go for the field. So how do we convey that to the person that buy the sheep from, that that's what we want? Is there a term for that stage of the sheep?
Yeah, they're called feeder lambs. You want to buy feeder lambs. And feeder lambs are stable. They're completely weaned. They're not weaned on the truck as they go from their farm to your farm. That would be horrible. And you'd have a lot of death loss with that. So they need to be weaned, and so you need to ask them how long have they been weaned.
So what do you recommend that they let them, how long they've been weaned? 3 months?
Well, yeah, I would say if they wean them at 2, then you don't want to take them for probably at least 2 weeks, probably up to a month after that. A lot of times people go by weight. They'll say like 60 pounds is a good feeder lamb. But the other thing is you need to make sure to minimize the stress by finding out how they're being fed, so that when you bring them to your farm, that you're doing it in a similar way. Are they being brought in at night? Are they used to dogs? If you're not using dogs, or vice versa, if they're not being used to dogs and you're using dogs to work them, those are all stress factors. You want to minimize the amount of differences from the receiving farm, the farm of origin.
Well, the arrays are going to be fenced off with cage fencing about 8 foot high. So I don't see the necessity for dogs, but would you advise having a dog in with them?
No. Why do they have to be 8 foot high fences?
That's what the specs on the zoning and everything are.
For sheep?
No,
that's
for the solar panels.
Oh.
And they didn't want predators coming in, deer and whatever else.
Yeah.
They want to keep all the wildlife out because they can damage the panels. That's what they're going to be building, about 7 foot, 8 foot high.
Okay, you won't have any problems.
So they'd be safe rummaging around on their own.
If it's cage wire,
Yeah.
Can I ask you, how do you maintain the pasture under the panels?
We've been thinking about that. When they graze it down pretty good, there's going to be, each parcel's going to have 2 array fields on each one. Is at a certain point, keep an eye on what's left of grass, gets down pretty close, bring them over to the other one. Let them graze. Hopefully that'll burn up the whole summer.
Once the panels are up, can you saw any of that space with a tractor? You can't get to it, right?
Did you say that again, please?
You can't get to the solar field with a tractor, right?
I mean, in the field, in the array
With the
field?
solar panels, yeah.
So you can't re-sow it.
They allow mechanical mowing of sorts in there. It's got to be maintained to keep the vegetation down. You can't shadow on the panel, lower panels, and they lose power. So
I
my
guess
first
what
thought,
I'm saying is that you can sow like you do, and you can top sow seeds.
yes, that's what I plan on
You
doing.
can't rework the area once the panels are up. You're sort of
I'm going to seed it in with, they're going to rip the ground up pretty bad, so I'm going to go in there with a ripper and seed it and harrow it down and roll it
To establish your seed bed.
Yeah.
To establish.
they're
your
hay
seed
fields
bed.
right now, but mostly just whatever's growing is growing.
And how many acres is it?
They're about a couple acres each, the fields.
And how many sheep do you plan on putting on?
Well, that's why I was asking before, as to what would be the optimum number
Yeah.
for like a 2-acre plot.
Yeah, to go to the Cornell website. I mean, I just can't remember the number off my head, but go to the Cornell website and then put that question out there. Yeah.
Does that sound like a feasible plan to graze one array, and then as soon as they get it down pretty good, bring them over to the other one and
Well, yeah, that's the way you manage grazing, is you move them, you keep
But you said
moving.
earlier not to put them back on the original.
That, yeah, but that's a luxury. That's nice for the Midwest. That's nice where we have huge 1,000-acre farms, but it's not practical here.
But you can also, the space you have, depending on how many sheep you get, obviously, you can fence it off with electrical fence. So if you have a smaller flock, you can fence it off and you can speed race it, so they move every other day or every third day, or, I mean, you can choose your pieces. So to
Well,
speak.
we don't know how much feasibility we're going to have to work inside that array field. They're pretty fussy about what goes on in there.
That's why she was suggesting temporary fencing. I don't know if we had any of the pictures, but did you see any of the temporary fence we put up there, the net fencing?
Yeah.
We'll put that up. Yes.
When you're buying new sheep to replace ewes, for example, or the rams, are you quarantining them? How are you sourcing, and what's your disease and health protocol for a new animal?
Okay, so the only thing we source is our rams. So we brought in 2 new rams, kept them separate for about a month before we introduced them to the other rams. So.
All your replacement ewes are from your own flock?
Yes. Okay, only one other time did we buy a group of 60 polypays, and we brought them in to our flock. And that was so long ago, I don't remember how we handled that. But we typically would have quarantined first. It's a good measure.
In buying a flock, or I'd like to be starting from scratch. So if you were in my position, how would you think about those issues of sourcing and disease?
Well, it depends upon your marketing. I mean, if you want to buy a flock of purebreds,
I'd like to buy a
because
flock and have what you're doing, a closed flock.
right.
That's what I'm after.
So you can do it slowly and make mistakes while you only have a few to make the
That's how I
mistakes
like
on.
to do it.
Or you can do it larger and be devastated if you have mistakes. So say you want, I don't know what your resources are, but say you want to start with 5 ewes in a ram, and then say those ewes lamb and you get 10 lambs and you get 5 more, say 5 females. So then you can hold those females and you can see what's going to happen. So, yeah, you can do that, buy a few. But one of the things I didn't address is if you want to get in the business of selling breeding stock, because we're not in that business now. Having said that, we're bringing 10 lambs to Vermont tomorrow that are breeding rams, but they were not designed for breeding rams. They were designed to go to slaughter, but this particular group, they wanted them for breeding rams, so we priced them a little bit higher for that, but typically they're what you call commercial sheep. They're not purebred. Every once in a while we'll have a ram because I was involved in a job called Northeast Livestock Processing Service Company, where I worked with 200 farmers, beef, all livestock farmers. And so I'd have to go to different farms to select livestock, and every once in a while there'd be a really nice sheep farm, and I'd say, oh, those lambs are great, I'd love to incorporate a little bit of that. So you buy a ram that was going to go to slaughter, and so we had a couple of those too. Actually, I did that a couple of 4 rams. They had tails because they were supposed to go to slaughter, but we didn't have to remove the tails, and they managed to handle them very well, kind of like twist them out of the way. So.
Now, a lamb is first year hits the ground. Then it's yearly. So when you market, you were at the farmers markets, did you ever, butcher older, say a 3-year-old? How do you market that then? what label is it?
That is so delicious, just like when you send cull cows to market. Do you know that all that hamburger that you're eating is from cull cows? You know, that's what happens. Mutton is, in fact, I have to pick up tomorrow a lamb and a ewe that I sent to slaughter for Easter. We didn't eat the ewe for Easter, but I needed to have legs of lamb on my table for Easter because how can you be on a sheep farm and not serve lamb on Easter? So I got the legs, but they didn't have the rest of the lamb processed. So that one lamb was born in November, so that's fine. That one was about 90 pounds when we shipped it. And then the ewe, she only raised one, and I had to help her do that. So I said, the heck with you. And she went to slaughter, and I told them, he just called me today and said, I lost the cutting instructions. How did you want that ewe, that cull ewe done? And I said, I want her stew and ground. Don't compromise the ground by taking too much stew, because the stew is the lean part. So I wanted to have a good balance, like an 80% lean on my ground. And that makes the most delicious burger.
Well, if you were going to sell it as a joint, how would you market it as mutton? Because
Well, I
a
did
certain
some research on that this year because I had heard from one processor that we dealt with that you could mark lamb even if it wasn't under a year of age. If it were older, yearling or mutton, you could still market lamb. Because in the sheep industry, we're at a distinct disadvantage in having to mark ground sheep meat as mutton.
But,
It's horrible.
well, I mean, people hear mutton and they go.
Exactly. But yet, when you have an old cow, it's
Right.
just marked ground beef.
So,
But you're required, I mean, I guess, I only have an example of USDA, the slaughterhouse, the processing, and they can't mark anything now because of 1 year, right?
That's right.
So after 1 year, it's mutton, but from what I've seen, what they do is they mark between 1 and 2 years, they can label it target. And that's how they sell it at this farm. So then the clients know that it's between 1 and 2 years.
Which is basically yearling. If you went to a USDA class,
Yeah.
the classifications, it's lamb, yearling, and mutton.
okay.
And
So
mutton
you
is
could put
over
yearling lamb
two.
then.
Pardon me?
You could put it down as yearling lamb.
No, lamb or year.
No.
Okay.
It's only a lamb for a year.
That's like-
But
So
honest to
my
God,
advice
if
to
If
you-
you eat mutton, you wouldn't know that it's not lamb.
Yes,
I mean, if
it's
it's really, really
delicious.
good meat, you won't know. It's that thing with the woolly stuff that I never even
With the
tasted
what?
that ever. You know, people say that it tastes like wool. And it doesn't, unless it's like
I've never eaten wool.
or something.
Very well.
Okay, so some might say it's more gamey. But the important thing is, are you direct marketing at farmers markets?
Not yet.
Well-
We have slow growing breed with Chevy's and Shepherds, and the meat is delicious.
Mhm.
But we only just started lambing because they didn't want to deal with the snow. So they won't hit the ground until this month, the end of this month. So they would be a lamb up until April of next year,
Mm.
Yeah.
and then the yearling.
And basically, as long as their teeth aren't showing, if they don't have their permanent set of teeth, they can be lamb. Maybe they're 14 months before they get their permanent first set of
So that
teeth.
is, well, they said because we put mutton on it, people just got it right.
My advice to you, because remember that farmer's market scene where I had all my products out there? Okay, those all had to be processed under USDA. So, for the ground lamb, because we were moving so much lamb, I don't think I did much in the way of cull use, but it was, it would be no problem to do this. We also had a food concession, okay, where, because the market that we were dealing with was relatively new. I mean, this was several years ago, like 25 years ago now. and they didn't have on-site food. And so they said, you know, we started sampling, and so all the vendors would smell the bacon cooking or smell the sausages cooking, because we would sample it right there on the fry pan and hand it out for samples to our, you know, prospective customers. And so the vendors would hear that, smell that, and they'd say, oh, could you just make me a sandwich, or could you just... So then we decided, okay, look, everybody likes this stuff. We're gonna just do on-site food preparation. So it wasn't a big deal. We went and got our $30 health permit from the county, and we set up shop and we started selling, as long as we had USDA meats. We did a food concession in addition to the meat sales. Now, we had all kinds of good things with the pork. But I said to myself, so many people come up to the booth and they'll say, do you sell a hamburger? And I'd say, you know, ground lamb is really good, but I can't sell it as a hamburger, it's not beef. So I said, and it was also a non-mover in my meat case. People just didn't want to buy plain ground lamb. So I said, I got to do something to make that into a burger. So I talked to some chefs. I took all the knowledge that my mother had given me about how to cook lamb, what herbs and spices went well with it, and I came up with my own recipe, and I called it, the name of the farm was Currytown, so I called it the Currytown Herby Burger, because it was filled with herbs and spices, okay? But the base of it was lamb. Now, right underneath the ingredients listed, the first ingredient was lamb, or mutton, whichever it happened to be, but then all the other herbs and spices. And so we would serve that on a Kaiser roll with ranch dressing, lettuce, and tomato, and it became an automatic hit. The other thing is, when people could buy it on site, they then wanted to go to the meat case and buy the pre-made burgers from the meat case. So then we got the label approved with USDA, and we got a slaughterhouse that would make the burgers for us. So then we could sell them out of the meat case too. And to this day, my niece does the auction. She took over our spot. And to this day, she still has people that come and ask about the Herby burger. So you can make a delicious burger, but what I would do is sample it if you're going to do direct marketing. Sample it, seasoned and spiced, and then don't tell them it's lamb or mutton until after they eat it, and they're going to say it's delicious, and then you got them hooked.
I mean, if you just like sheep burger, we'll say, does that, it's a, you still have to go through the rules and regulations of beef.
Yeah, and you know, and like I said, this one slaughterhouse said to me, we can market lamb, mutton, or whatever. And so I called him up, because in this slaughterhouse that I'm consulting in right now, there was those Jacob lambs that came in there, and there was one Cullew. And I wanted to have, she wanted that all into ground, and she wanted to mark that ground lamb. So I checked the USDA regulations, and I couldn't find that you could do it there. So I called up the slaughterhouse, the manager of the slaughterhouse, who had told me that could be done. And I said to him, is that written somewhere in the Code of Federal Regulations? Because I'm not finding it. And he said, it was told to me. I said, it was told to you and you never followed up with the Code of Federal Regulations? He said, no, I probably should have done that. So then I went and did more research and found out it could not, and I even had the inspector check for me. And it has to be labeled mutton. So there, I don't know what he was smoking that day, but he should have shared.
Do you have any permanent fencing?
On this farm, no. On our last farm, we did put cage wire all around but we were sitting on a highway.
Yeah. Do you have electric top line?
Nope.
Just
Nope.
4-foot cage wire?
Yeah, the only electric we ran on the perimeter, and that really wasn't perimeter, was we also had hogs. So we had a hog fence, and they'll dig to China if you let them, hogs will. So
Yeah.
we had 2 strands of electric wire on the bottom of that.
Okay.
But our divisions, our subdivisions in the outside was fenced with page wire, but our subdivisions were electric.
Do you have netting?
No, we didn't, well, we did use some netting at the time. Originally, we did reel, We also rented another farm just to get the 30 acres of pasture around. We had like 200 ewes. So we rented another farm and we did all, the perimeter was high tensile fencing. My husband and I put up ourselves. 30 acres of
Six
it.
wire?
It was 5.
5.
And then the subdivisions were real.
Just one real wire?
Oh, no, 3.
3. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like cattle. Cattle were a lot easier to fence.
Yeah, 5 was enough, they didn't get out or sometimes, but.
For the high
tensile.
for the high tensile, 5 was enough, yeah.
So you didn't have any major roads, so you.
No, that was at the end of a long driveway. So we've had different farms where we've been, and that one was at the end of a long driveway. So, and we didn't have predator issues with the high tensile either.
And or people were the page wire, both of them, no predators or.
Predator, we did have a dog get in the field, our neighbor's German Shepherd was
Yeah,
able to
with
get
the
in the
5
field.
wire.
With the page wire.
Huh?
And I don't know whether he
Climb.
dug underneath or what he
Yeah.
did, but he only got in the field once. And then we talked to the neighbor who said, can't have that happen again because we'll shoot the dog. And so the dog managed to stay home after that.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
and it's important that the neighbors understand that, you know. In fact, when we, you know, that one field I said we just had the bulldozer came in and we opened that up. Well, they have a very large dog. There's just on the perimeter of that field, there's a house with a very large dog. And we made a point of going to them and saying, your dog runs that field typically and he thinks it's his own, you know?
Yeah.
But right now, we're gonna use it for our sheep. You need to understand that. And they said, don't worry about it. And he's never been a problem. So, just neighbors have to understand that.
Sure. One other shop question, that trailer you have in the picture, the gooseneck, how many sheep do you get?
40 lambs.
40?
You can get 40 lambs. So if you have small lambs, you can put them up in the gooseneck part of it.
Yeah. The bump thing.
And 2 in the front seat.
But
Have you done any dairy or tried any, just as a,
for sheep dairy,
yeah, for yourself?
I like to eat the cheese, but no. I've had the milk and it's delicious.
Delicious, yeah.
And like I said, we have an Amish community that has a lot of sheep dairy by us.
Oh, they do.
So I've also, instead of getting milk replacer, gone to them to buy their milk. And that's helped a bit better for the lambs.
So I got a question, just to bounce off you. We had a problem with rams just tearing up the barn. I built a nice pipe shed out of some pipe that I had left over, and I made this like a salt blocks type of shed, about 12 foot deep, 20 foot long. It had a garden gate door on it, so it kind of shifted a little bit. It's still open, it blows and latches, really great. Put D-rings in it, we used it for panels in it, we used it as a landing shed one time. And we moved it into this field with the rams. It was okay for a while, and then every once in a while I hear this loud bang. I thought, neighbors must be having some kind of frustrating project. They don't seem to be getting anywhere. After a while, I noticed that the door was busted up, and then, long story short, they blew out the whole end of it. I had the 3/8 real thin texture 111 plywood. I want to keep it light. I had a steel roof on it. Like buy the plywood cheap, I just screw it straight to the pipes with silk like screws. And I was proud of myself. But now this idiot just blew everything out. And when we moved into this little landing shed again, I built it out of stuff that we had on the place on practically nothing. It's a nice little shed, but before he got done, I guess he got bored and just blew the one end out.
Was it just one ram?
Well, that one's gone, but well, he went off to freezer camp, but the others, you know, they're working on the backside of this shed up there now. And I know I could probably put like rubber horse pants around. One time I went to Pennsylvania for this one horse person. I got these big rolls of mining belts. They're like 3-4 foot wide. They're pretty heavy. They're using them as flooring, you know, in the barn. And there's that, but you know, I know that Temple Grandin book. I read that one that she had, and it was kind of interesting. All this, the way animals behave and their thought patterns and all that. I wish it was like some kind of deter it, that you just wouldn't have to rebuild the shed, you could get it, do something. I mean, you ever had any problems with that? And that's,
Well, typically, we don't have rams by themselves, number one. I think animals are generally miserable
Oh, they
by
were in a group.
themselves.
We were in a group, we have the Chevy and the Shetland rams together, but it always seemed to be the Shetland ram. And they blow a hole out their height. And the Chevy and ram side was great because they could just walk underneath and switch their backs as they went through it. But it's just, we noticed it dip, I don't know if you've dealt with on sheep before.
Well, both the Cheviots are pretty, like the bug eyes and
Yeah.
stuff. And the Shetlands are even smaller though, right?
Right, that's why the Cheviots loved it because they could switch the backs once the Shetlands blew the end of the bar.
Yeah.
So that was the, which blew the.
So are you in love with the breed?
Yeah, actually, they are, well, we just, if you had ever noticed that with the Hong breed as opposed to the Cold breed, we don't know, I mean, I don't know if it's just the Shetland horn thing where they get a headache or they just feel the urge to just knock something out of the water or, because the Sheffields don't do that. I mean, they'll do the run away thing.
Okay, and how is their behavior toward you?
You know, it's the ones that are aggressive, they're often pretty strict. The ones that are, you know, it's the, we don't.
Well, I mean, you have more to do than build rounding sheds.
Right.
So I would say that you need to have another freezer pantry.
Well, I didn't know if it was just, you know, a certain trait that was in the Hong breeds in general, or if it was just a particular breed, or if there was something that we could do to
Do the
lead it.
Shetlands have horns?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I guess I'm getting them confused with, but aren't they really tiny?
The little,
they got birds, don't like, yeah, I know.
Well, I grew up with horned horses.
yeah. Did you ever have a problem with them?
Every once in a while, we'd have one they knew it had a set of horns, and we would use it.
Well, it wasn't even so much on, I mean, it's not so much on us. It is basically, there's the end of it, and we just need a new doorway type of going through. And it's not all the time, it's just certain.
Yeah, probably not during breeding season, but this
No, but it's a, but there's, you know, they're out with other, they're not by themselves, they're out with the other rounders, and they will, you know, keep themselves occupied. But we
Well,
just-
I think animals are, they're all different, they
Yeah.
don't people and some go that. I see that we didn't discuss the market report. Does everybody understand how to read the market report? It's a little confusing, right?
Yes.
Could you share and I'll see a copy? Oh, there's no. Okay. All right. All right, so New Holland is a good, okay, New Holland's a good sale, it's probably the best in the Northeast. But now my one brother, he's got 300 ewes, and he's been using Central Bridge, but you can't overdo these local markets. Like here you have Chatham, I think it is, right? Is it Chatham? You have a good livestock auction, Empire Livestock Auction in Chatham? Yeah, okay, so you can't overdo it. What I have learned is to avoid the Easter sale holidays. They tend to be too many coming in at the same time. Now, some of the Muslim holidays are still good, but by and large, you need to watch. It appears that the auctions are better a week or 2 weeks after the actual holiday auction because everybody shipped for the holiday. So, all right, so let's read this New Holland sale. This was just this week, Monday, April 2nd. So the first part of this up here on top, it says sheep and goat receipts. Now you'll see the receipts of 1774 was the number of sheep and lambs that were sold on Monday, okay? Compared to 3293 the previous week, okay? So now right there, that's going to tell you the market's probably going to be called up because the receipts were almost half of what they were the previous week, which was probably being sold for Easter. Okay. Oh, yeah, here you go. Now you go down a couple paragraphs. Slaughter sheep. Compared to last week, slaughter lamb sold mostly $20 to $40 higher on lighter supply. So that pulls my point. The lambs all came in for the holiday, the week before the holiday. So the week after, look at how much higher the prices were. Okay, so if you've got lambs that were born, some people for some reason, lamb in January. So they might have 50-pound lambs or 40-pound lambs by, the end of March. So 40 to 50, if you go down here, slaughter lambs, wooled and choice. Wooled and shorn, choice and prime. Okay, wool just means they've never been shorn, which little lamb shouldn't be. But you'll see in the first group of prices, they talk about the weights being 90 to 110 pounds, 110 to 130. And these are still lambs. Now remember, they're all under a year of age. And look at, you can get them up to 200 pounds. Some of these bigger breeds. And that's what I was telling you to be wary of. But look, if you've got 100-pound lamb between the 90 and the 110, you're getting almost $300 for it. That's pretty damn good money, folks. Real good money. So then in the ones below that, it says slaughter lambs wooled and shorn just choice. Okay, so they weren't the highest grade. So if you went to a 100-pound lamb there, you'd have to go to the next page, and you see that's about a quarter a pound less. The average price was $274. Now, just over the last year or so, they've separated out the hair sheep from the wooled sheep. Notice that? It's under the wooled and shorn sheep, but then they separate out the hair sheep.
Why did they do that?
Well, at one point, they were bringing more, and then at other points, they're bringing less. So I don't know why they separate them out now.
Is there a trend in one direction or another that you know?
I would like to be able to draw that conclusion just as you would. I'd like to say, oh, well, they're always less, or oh, they're always more, but sometimes they're more and sometimes they're less, so I haven't seen a trend yet. But right now, here, they're less, right?
I think one exception.
That's 'cause
See,
they're
now
not-
there you go.
One exception.
One exception.
They're not really sheep, that's why.
They're not really sheep.
That's what it was.
They look more like goats,
All
right?
the wool sheep, the wool owners, I know they all say those aren't sheep.
Yeah. Fancy means really probably not weaned. Well, 80 or 90 pounders could not be weaned, but they're just roly-polies. When they say fancy, that's what they mean, they're roly-polies. Now, the thing that you should know, the difference in this report when it comes to the lambs and on the second page, the goats. There is one very primary difference, and must be aware of that. Lambs are sold by the hundredweight. So you see $3.23, 0.9 is actually, $323.90 is basically $3.23 a pound, okay? But when it comes to the kids, look at the top line, bucks, billies, and wethers. All goats are sold by the head on estimated weights. And there are many times that the goats have been outselling the lambs. It just takes them a lot longer to get there. Like it might take, you can get a lamb to market at 100 pounds in 6 months, 5 or 6 months, and with kids, they're normally over a year. So anyway, those are estimated weights, but their price is per head, and that's important for you to know. Anybody gonna go in the goat business? Yeah, they go nice with the sheep as far as You know, you can market them all to the same people. A lot of people come to the farm and they'll get some goats, or a lot of people, you know, want for the halal holidays, they'll want the cull ewes. And so that's good. And then they'll say, geez, do you have any goats, or, you know, do you have any ducks or whatever? But those are all
Do
good
goats
things.
and sheep graze nicely together, or they?
Yeah. And sheep can, multi-species grazing is a good thing to do too.
Cows,
Mhm.
pigs,
Yeah, yeah, so.
you don't have to worry
Pigs
about
root
other-
everything up though,
Yeah,
They
even if
really
they have
do.
enough space.
even if they have enough space, they just
Yeah.
like to
Good
dig to China.
They're so hard. I think I missed what you were saying about the goats versus the bucks and billies. So they're giving an average weight and a price range.
Price range, meaning, okay, so, now Slaughter Kids Selection 1. Selection 1 are the best kids, okay? They're the meatiest. They're probably what you would call meat goats.
Mhm.
They're probably boars, that's the breed. Okay, so there's 20 head that weighed, on the estimate, 40 to 60 pounds. Their average weight being about 48. And the price they sold, they could have been sold in various lots, but they went anywhere from 170 to 205 per head.
And 184 was the average.
So in $184 per head was the average. It was pretty darn good money too.
So if you're looking at this report, how do you transmit this information? What do you do with this information? Does it help you with your marketing, you know,
Yeah, you
how
follow the
plan your-
report every week. You can go online and get the report every week. It's on, the sales are on Monday. And then you can follow it and trend it. And like I said, if you go to the Cornell website, or you get the calendar, you all got the calendar, you can watch and relate it to. And basically, this holiday was after Easter, and so it proved the point that everybody sold them for the holiday. And they called the market last week, they called it, I think, $20 lower. When they say they called it, they state the trend at the beginning. You know, I was trained as a market reporter, and we had to learn to state the trend. So. Also, you should know that when it comes to lambs, everything grades choice. I mean, lambs are not like cattle at all. You know, just about everything grades choice. So, so prime is, you know, something with some fat on it.
We're going to talk breeds next week, but you've been around a lot of sheep. Do you have preferred, can you give a quick discussion of maybe your favorite 5 breeds?
Well, I prefer breeds that breed out of season. So basically anything, now do your Shetlands, if they're horned, basically anything that's horned typically breeds out of season.
Well, we don't put the rams in until, December.
If you left the rams in, would they breed for the fall? Would they breed in May for the fall?
I don't know, because I don't really know. And I prefer to have the rams out so they don't get possessed of their flock.
Okay.
Because we run the Chevys and Chevys together,
Mhm.
and we have a couple of weathers that are out there. And I did try reintroducing, moving the weather out into the land population. And I used them as a basketball, even though it was so the weather went back in with the ewes, was very happy. And the yearlings this year, are bouncing around and are about to get sorted, who's going on the market, who's going to go back into the showrooms.
You wait till the yearlings to sell them for market?
There's not much room in the
Mhm.
so it is
Are you 100% grass-fed?
no.
Well, why isn't there much meat on them before?
Well, it's a small breed, and it was people want, bigger leg, they want bigger joints, and so.
So I guess the question is, why do you have that breed then?
Because we're short people, and when our children were going to 4-H, we didn't want sheep that could look us in the eye and have an attitude, basically. the Shetlands are easy to handle. They're actually very bright. They're in some respects like almost dog-like. Which sounds strange, but the fleece is also very much in demand. So that is, and
So you're raising the sheep primarily for the marketing of the wool?
the wool, they go, people like them. We have a lot of weekenders who have a small area that they like to have sheep, but big sheep intimidate. The
Intimidate
Shetlands-
me too, they're big.
Well, that's the thing of it, and, the Shetlands, you can move them in a minivan. They do have a personality. We get Christmas cards from people who bought our sheep. Sending us pictures of the sheep celebrating Christmas over the days. I know it sounds, but they really like them.
Okay, so from my perspective, I'm all about production. I really don't care about the Christmas cards
Yeah,
and
no,
all that other
it's
stuff.
it's essentially, the meat tastes good. The fleece sells very well. And we can take them anywhere.
Okay, well, the whole minivan thing, that's,
No,
my brother has 300 ewes, they're all Dorset, mostly Horn Dorset, and he takes them 10 at a time in a Jeep
Yeah,
down to the market,
yeah.
which is only 16, 14 miles away. But, and they're Dorsets, so he takes them 10 at a time, puts them in the side door, takes them out the side door, it's all fun. But, so we like the Dorsets because, and we have never gone for the big ones. We want something that'll finish 90 to 120, 110 pounds. That's fine for us. We like the polypays as well. What we've experienced in the last polypays we bought was that they're a manufactured or composite breed. So they're made up of Dorset, Finn, Rambouillet, and Targhee. I think those 4 breeds. And they have more lambs, that's true. But they also have, udders that are very, very, high producing. So when we're trying to wean our lambs off at 2 months, we have real trouble getting them to stop with the production. So we're kind of going away from that particular farm where we bought those last polypays. But the ones we had before, they worked right like our Dorsets. They were just really great. So like I said, we only have 75 ewes now, but we've had 200 ewes. It's a little more challenging when you have that many. But the thing is, with sheep, you can handle them. And that's what's always attracted me to them. Because that's how I made money for college, was shearing sheep. Now you have to understand a little bit about my history. I'm 61 years old right now. So when I was 14, I said, my brothers were shearing sheep. And I said to my mother, I want to learn how to shear sheep. And she said, you don't understand. Young ladies don't shear sheep. So, that was right at the time when young ladies were arriving, let's say that. And so I said, but Mom, I really want to learn to shear sheep because I think I want to be a sheep farmer someday. And so things progressed, and finally she relented, and my brother taught me to shear sheep. And then when he got through college, he realized he didn't really want to shear sheep anymore. So he gave me all his accounts. So I went, and now my parents were such good parents. From the time we were 14 and 15, my other brother Tommy and I learned to shear sheep at the same time. And so they would take us all around the state of New Jersey to all these little flocks. We couldn't drive, we were kids. And we'd shear all these sheep. And we'd get $2 a head, and it was glorious because that was big money for us, And then we were always home to be on the farm to help with the hay whenever, because you never knew when you were going to have a hay day. So it was really good to do that as a part-time job. And I found out that when I wanted to go waitressing or take a summer job waitressing. My mother didn't want me to do that anymore because she said I made more money shearing sheep, and I was always there for the farm, for the hay and stuff. So then I went to college and I started to take the slaughter classes and all that other stuff. And she said, oh no, young ladies don't take slaughter classes. So I went through the whole thing all over with her again. But it turns out, finally, by the time I was in my 30s, that she finally relented and decided it was okay for me to shear sheep. It was okay for me to slaughter, and it was okay for me to have a farm and do all that stuff. So, but in the end, it's been good, and it's only this year that I haven't sheared any sheep. I've sheared every year, trying to keep my skill sharp. So, but it gets harder when you're older. Just want to tell you that. So, but it is hard to find shearers. Yeah, especially for small flocks.
The farm you grew up on in New Jersey?
I grew up on a farm in New Jersey.
Where?
Are you a Jersey boy? Okay, Bridgewater?
No, I know where it is. I live near the border. I live in Port Jervis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's not that far away.
Yeah, from New York.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been
Yeah.
living in Vernon for a while, but I don't know where Bridgewater is.
Bridgewater's in Somerset County,
Oh,
right there in the middle of the state.
I work with horses, so I'm in that. part of
Jersey's
the
a big
state.
horse
Oh,
state, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's still a very pretty state, too.
It is.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we've kind of gotten tangential here, but is there anything else that I can answer your questions on? You've really been a very nice audience.
One more
price.
question.
One more.
The mixture of, I would like to grow it for wool and for meat. And a lot of the established farmers tell me they don't think that's a good idea. They think it might be too much, or that they're often at odds, those two goals. Do you agree with that recipe?
Oh, there are a lot of the wool breeds that are excellent for meat. I mean, Romneys are good for wool and meat. Polypays have wonderful fiber, wonderful fiber. But that's because they've got part Rambouillet in there. You know, a lot of them are, well, like my friend who had the Jacobs, you know, I don't know what the tensile strength of the fiber was really like. It was just mostly the pattern that was so desirable for hides more.
I have friends on the West Coast doing that, both with Tunis sheep.
They're pretty, they're redheads.
And it seems very successful for them. So
Yeah, they're pretty. And they're some of the nicest sheep to shear too. They have such a wonderful docile temperament. Unlike what you're talking about with those Cheviots and Shetlands. But they're really a nice breed. But they don't have a lot of multiple births, and they don't lay them out of season.
Yeah.
So that nicked them off my list. Because I really want sheep that lay them out of season. I really like the fall laying.
And that's just because the marketability.
Yeah. We had some lambs that were born in the spring, and we marketed them to New Holland, and they were about the same. They were like 80 pounds, somewhere around 80 pounds, and they brought like $160 a piece. And then we marketed a group in the spring that were born in the fall, and they were $230 for the same. You know, it's a big difference. You know?
It really is whether you're hay or not. Like I'm going to have mildly on pasture, so it'll be really, I don't want to be in the hay business so much.
Okay, so but are you 100% grass-fed?
I'll probably be in a little bit. I'll get that to that hurdle. I'll have to see how they finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And the other thing is just be very, very careful about the parasites with lambs on pasture. If you're keeping them on the ewes, they don't get as heavily parasitized. But if you wean them and keep them on like you
And
want
about
feeder lambs, and you're going to have them on pasture, they're not going to be on their mamas or anything. You're just going to have feeder lambs out there. You have to be very careful. You might have to wean them. You might have to worm them every 6 weeks.
As a veterinarian, they give them a shot or something like that?
Well, you said an oral wormer. Yeah. You don't have to have a vet to. Don't have a call vet to work for whatever you can do yourself.
It's not that hard
Yeah, it's
to do
not.
with the horses.
Yeah.
These prices you have here, these are selling for meat market. We're going to buy a sheep to...
A feeder lamb?
Yes. Are we looking at the same prices as this?
You hope not, don't you?
I'm praying not. No, I don't want to be seeing these kind of prices.
You're gonna buy them, number one, you're gonna try to buy them at a time when it's lower market.
Yeah, around May, late April, May, something
That's a high market.
like that. Maybe
Yeah,
this,
that's a high market.
is it? What's going on that time of year?
Well, most people don't want to land in January or February, or even December.
So when would be a good time to buy?
The fall.
Wait, whoops.
They're gonna be cheaper in the fall.
Yeah, but that's not gonna work for us.
I know. Well, you can work with an individual farmer. I mean, those Jacobs she buys, she works with the same farmer every year because that farmer wants to go to her farm because she knows she feeds non-GMO grain and she's very humane and the whole thing. So maybe if you could work with a farmer directly, figure somebody out and say, look, we need to be able to make money too. Can we come to an agreement? And it doesn't necessarily, you can use that as a guideline, but it doesn't, you don't have to kill yourself. Try to pick the Easter market. Looks like you should have gone last week. When the Easter sale is on, when it's typically populated. Maybe that's what you should do.
Right now, it's just mud out there. I mean, it's nothing for me.
Yeah, but it might not be, do you have any type of shelter at all that you can?
Oh, yeah, we have some sheds and things.
Well, then you should buy them when they're going for the Easter market, when there's too many on the market, and buy them and put them in the shed for a month. That might be worth your while. Might be worth your while.
You have to raise feeder lambs on pasture. What are measures you could take to reduce the parasite load?
Well, having enough pasture where you can keep moving them.
Like daily?
Well, daily is okay, but you don't have to be daily. But don't graze them down too short.
That's when parasites get going.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Don't graze them down too short. People tend to overgraze their pastures. And that's bad for parasites and it's bad for the pastures.
Are there sheep operations that never bring the sheep inside? Or you just have like a run-in?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. There are. I wouldn't want to do it, but they do.
The difficulties with predators or parasites, kind of everything?
Predators, and also we've had such a terrible winter. You know, can you imagine if the rams were in or you maybe didn't realize that you were, feeding and you didn't realize and some of them got bred in that horrible winter and terrible. It's really demoralizing when you go out and see dead lambs because it's been so cold.
Yeah.
It's
When they're
terribly
dropping
demoralizing.
in
Yeah,
January.
terribly demoralizing.
With
And it's a fact of life, it does happen, so.
With the temperature issue being such a consideration, have you ever thought about heating the barn in some way instead of bringing them inside, or there's not that many?
We're not,
that
we're,
need the
we're
heat?
not fond of heat lamps. We lived through a barn fire and we had a dairy. So we're just not fond of using heat lamps. My brother uses them all over the place, but,
Typically, there's enough warmth just in the livestock to keep it warm.
well, like we have pole barns, so they're not very warm because they're high ceilings and everything. But in some of these older dairy barns, like that one barn we put the high tensile fence around, that was a bank barn. That was much warmer.
That's
That was
reminding me
much.
of going to low ceiling bank barn.
Yeah, low ceiling bank
Ventilation.
barn. You just have to be careful what kind of skid steer you get. We got the smallest one they made to get in there to clean it. Or you can rent a skid steer too, but a lot of these equipment places don't have really small ones. So, but there's so many things that I could tell you, but I don't know what direction you're going in. So, I do have some cards if you feel like you need to chat every once in a while, just don't abuse it. Call me in the middle of the night and say, I gotta use this lamp, I don't know what to do with her. I'll say.
Call your vet.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So, I think the thing about sheep is that they're really a wonderful species. And the other thing to work with, you can handle them. But the other thing, I work with cattle farmers all the time, and they think they got it all going on. And I'm telling you, they don't. But I'll tell you why they don't, and most people don't realize this. But there are a couple things about the differences between sheep and cattle. Number one is they're just generally far more efficient. Now, I told you I took the meat science courses, right? One of the big takeaways I got from that is that for every 50 pounds of lamb carcass weight, you should see, on the average, 2 square inches of ribeye on your chops. For beef, for every 100 pounds of carcass weight, you should see 2 square inches of ribeye. That means the lambs are twice as efficient, right, in their production. Number one. Number two, it's like 7 to 10 sheep to equal 1 beef cow. Okay? Right? So we're talking animal units. So if you do the math and you find out you get 1 cow, takes 9 months to have a calf, and then another 2 years to raise it. And sometimes if you're doing grass-fed, they go over 30 months. So 2 years. The good ones, if you're going to grain-fed, 15 months you might get it. 1 calf, 15 months. But if you take those same multiplication with the animal units, and you have that 9-month gestation and the 2 years, you're basically occupying that cow for 3 years for 1 calf. But what can you get from a sheep? First of all, you're getting 7 to 10 ewes, and what is she going to produce in 3 years? She's probably going to have, if you've got, let's say round numbers, 10 ewes, you're probably going to have, conservatively speaking, 150% lamb crop. So you're going to have 15, right? Let me just do it right. 15 lambs out of 10 ewes. And if you're not on an accelerated lambing program, 15 times 3 is 45 lambs. And if you've got $200 or $300 a lamb, that's big money. How much does that work out to us? It's just a lot more than beef is what I've done before I figured it out. It's just a lot more. $9,000 versus 1 calf.
Or a lot less than that.
Yeah, and the market right now is about $2 on the hanging weight. So you got a hanging weight of 800 pounds, $1,600. Little known secret is the sheep industry. When I took it in college, I took the course on animal science, and we talked about beef, sheep, swine, and poultry. Well, we got to the section on sheep, and the professor worked out all these numbers for us. I said to him, but professor, why is it that there aren't very many people in the sheep business? And he said, that is the best question, because I don't understand it. The only thing I can figure out is you can't wear a cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and a big buckle belt. That's when you're in the sheep business. It's like the lowest end of the totem pole. And then when my brother was in school, he was friends with a beef farmer family, and they invited him to the Bahamas because he had a ranch down there. And so he went down there, and the question was, why do I see you have cattle, and you have horses, and you have lambs and goats. Now, which one do you like best, and what do you think about all of them? And his answer was very succinct. He said, we have the horses for pleasure, we have the cattle for status, and we have the lambs and goats to pay for the other 2. So that's what I'm leaving with you tonight.
Thank you. That was
Thank you
great.
very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you get this magazine or not, but this came today.